Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. As I always say, everything that I'm going to say in this episode is completely speculative based on very little information available to us. Let's watch.
I have an RV. Is there parking for an RV? And he's like, yeah, it should be no problem.
That's a one-way street.
This is
Dude, stop, man. You got like a foot.
Thomas, can he fit there?
Are you kidding me? No way.
This is
my
unbelievable. Made leap. Is blood.
Okay, the guy that
Sorry,
we
if it's
parked
false, he
there.
booked it. And
Okay, so this is a classic example of undifferentiation or fusion, where they're in a tense situation. What are the tense aspects, the anxiety-provoking aspects? Well, one is they are stuck in a small, confined space with people that they hate. I think they literally hate each other. Two, they are going to an Airbnb they've never been to before. Maybe they're even in a town they've never been before. It's kind of a little bit tense situation. Three, they're trying to find the Airbnb and they're driving down some pretty narrow roads. So each person is operating within reason. Libby found the Airbnb. She asked the person, we have an RV, does it have parking for RV? And the person said it was no problem. Okay. So Libby was operating on that assumption. She did the best she could, probably. And then we have Andrei, who is trying to get them to that location. And he's doing the best he can. He's getting them there. But it's a pretty tight street. And we hear the other people who are saying things like, what are you doing? This is tight. Andrei is starting to use a lot of swear words. He does that when he gets anxious. Everyone is so there are two main categories of behavior based on differentiation level. So if I was Jen, here's what if I was in Jen's position, this is what I would be thinking. I'd be thinking, okay, my sister found the Airbnb. She did the best she could under the circumstances. Maybe the person at the Airbnb didn't give enough information like, hey, there's a pretty tight road getting here. Or maybe when we were looking at the Google Maps trying to find this place, we didn't do our due diligence to make sure that the roads were wide enough for an RV. So it's not really anyone's fault. And Andrei's doing the best he can. He's probably the best suited to drive this thing since he was trained on how to drive larger vehicles. And he seems to be doing okay so far. And it's kind of out of my hands. We're stuck on these small streets, and I'm a little anxious, but there's nothing I can do. And I'm just going to make matters worse if I start spouting off and distracting the driver and blaming Libby or getting upset. There's nothing I can do. That's differentiation, is the ability to say there's tension that rises in the emotional system, the family emotional system, that if we consider it one unit, the tension is going up, and in the individuals, both contribute to each other. The individual tension adds to the family tension adds to the individual tension. As that tension goes up, our differentiation level goes down. And if we have a pretty low differentiation level anyway, it goes even further down, and we can't differentiate between the situation and our own feelings and between our feelings and our intellect. And so the feelings part of it is, what is happening right now? I'm scared. I'm noticing that. I'm noticing everyone else is tense. But what do I think about it? Well, there's nothing I can do. And everyone's doing the best they can. And maybe mistakes were made. But I think I would have made the same mistakes if I were in their position. If Andrei hits a car, it's not going to be my deal. I'm not going to have to pay for it. So, I guess Andrei will have to pay for it, or Dad will have to pay for it. I don't know. Not my problem. Plus, me getting worked up over it isn't going to help the situation. Maybe I'll throw out a suggestion like, whoa, maybe we should stop for a second, kind of scout ahead. Or even say, hey, everyone, be quiet. Andrei needs to be able to concentrate. This is differentiation, the ability to know your feelings and to look at it and analyze it, and then to be able to think, what's the best course of action here? My feelings are telling me that something might go wrong, but do I just need to spout that off and convert it into hostility and criticism for Andrei when he doesn't deserve it in the situation at all? Now, maybe he'll careen into a car and he deserved it. But I don't know if there's anything that you could do if you're in Jen's position. The other aspect of differentiation, if you're in Jen's position, is so I'm feeling tension in the room right now. Libby and Andrei are kind of yelling at each other, and it's starting to kind of freak me out. But let me think about that for a second. Not really my problem. That's between the two of them. I have some opinions about it, but it doesn't really serve anyone to spout that off right now. I'm not going to solve anyone's problems. Maybe I can even help and say, hey, everyone, everyone's doing their best. Andrei is doing his best. Libby, you did your best. Let's just calm down. Everyone's, let's just try to work together as a team here. Okay, so that's differentiation as well, is what is my goal? Well, my goal is to get to our destination safely. My goal is for all of us family members to get along. My goal is for me to be happy and not to be overwhelmed. So being differentiated helps you to see your goals and enact them. Let's see what they do.
Yeah, but the guy reassured her that we could park there.
Seriously, we're driving a
But
massive
they don't
bus.
tell you the address until you book it.
Come on.
Okay, can we not freak out yet? Just drive around and see if we can find something.
We can't park an RV in D.C.
I can't believe we've known this for 2 days driving here.
Pull over and figure this out.
I cannot pull over.
You can't pull over.
Did you see this?
So we see what they do. It's not just Jen. It's all of them. So they're in a tense situation, and they're turning on each other. A more differentiated family, a more mature family, a family with better boundaries, with better self-awareness, better understanding of how to get things done. At least one of the people in that RV would say, "Hey, everyone, calm down. And everything's real tense right now. Andrei, thank you. You're doing your best." Because Andrei is in a pretty rough. If you've ever been driving in a car with a bunch of people yelling, even if it's not at you, but particularly if they're yelling at you, particularly in your RV and you're in the city in Washington, D.C., that's rough. And so, a little bit of love to Andrei of just like, hey, you're doing your best. You really want him to be calm. You do not want him to be upset. Because we know what he does when he starts to try to take apart a fridge. So, yeah. But what do we expect from this family?
Getting the out of here. Get me out of the Thomas. Look at get a hotel.
So we're just not staying at the Airbnb that we plan to stay at.
I'm already booking this in Waldorf. Yeah, tons of space. They're like adjacent to a mall.
You guys, that's like 45 minutes, an hour away.
I don't give a
What do you want to do? Go to the White House? We can't take our RV in here.
So again, it's like you could just talk about it. And, I forget sometimes the kids are watching all of this. And although we wouldn't put it at a super high level of trauma and abuse to a child, it's definitely on the spectrum. To watch your family members yelling at each other, and at the very least, you're modeling behavior for the children. And we just have to wonder about the transgenerational modeling that has occurred regarding how differentiated you are and how you work things out. It appears as though they tried to go to the Airbnb, and maybe even they drove past it and they said, we can't park there. So now Andrei and the other guy are saying, let's just go to a hotel. There's definitely enough room for RVs if we find the right place. And now the sisters are saying, so we're just not even going to go there? Yeah, it's, I don't know.
What else do we have?
It's already done. He booked the rooms. We're going there.
We can't even park. No one knows what's going on. We're trying to find a hotel, but then it's like, okay, we were going to tour DC, but now we can't even do that.
I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but yes, Jen, that's the situation. Libby found an Airbnb. The person on the phone apparently misinformed them. So that's not on Libby. That's not Libby's fault. They tried to go there. They couldn't. And now they're looking for the next best option. Yes, Jen, that's the situation. This sort of attitude of, but I don't want to do this, therefore someone wronged me, is an interesting schema to have.
I took a lot of time to book it and make sure that it was the right one. So if you didn't put in an effort, you can't blame somebody else that did.
Actually, no, it was Libby's fault. For real.
She trusted the guy that wanted to make money and rent something out for 5 days.
Don't trust nobody.
No.
Because nobody gives a about no one.
Okay, so I don't know all the details, but it sounded like Libby did a good enough job and asked the questions and yeah, trusted them. And I would have trusted someone in a situation like that. Would I be that surprised if someone either was being a little tricksy with me over the phone or just doesn't understand? I mean, that's the thing that I would assume if, so Libby calls this Airbnb, the Airbnb place says, yeah, sure, RV. If we drove by the place and there was no spot for an RV, I would have said, oh, that guy just doesn't understand what an RV is. Like, it's not a common knowledge base to understand like how big an RV could be. Because some RVs are small, some are big. Anyway, so that would be my first thought of like, oh, that guy just doesn't understand what an RV is. And instead of thinking about that from Andrei's perspective, just like, oh, Libby should have been more specific, but of course I understand where she's coming from. She said RV. She thought the guy understood. Just giving a little bit of charity to other people, a little bit of benefit of the doubt. And why bicker? Why assume bad things? Libby didn't try to ruin everyone's time, right? She was doing the best she could. So it's that kind of attitude that doesn't actually help when you're talking about love and bonding and having a good time. Again, I just want to emphasize, I sort of said this before, but they were driving to stay in a place, and Libby looked up an Airbnb. They went to that place. Turns out wasn't a good place for parking. They found another place 45 minutes away, and voila, here they are. But they've been bickering and fighting the entire time because of nothing, essentially. Everyone did the best they could, and they're only 45 minutes difference. And you could argue it's better because they're at a hotel, everyone gets their own room. What's the big deal? But when you have an undifferentiated family ego mass and tension and triangulation, because now we have triangulation between Andrei and, is it Becca's husband and Libby. And then the triangulations will happen where people will complain about other people, anxiety moves around, coalitions begin and get torn apart. And I mean, here's a speculation. Andrei might even be amping up his anger because Becca's husband is also kind of against the situation. And now this is a chance for the two of these guys to bond in their enemyizing of other people. I don't know. But if you're Andrei, you're going to take any ally in this family that you can get because of all the animosity that he's experienced. And so when there's a lot of conflict and a lot of low differentiation, sometimes we will resort to triangulation to get people to it's a shortcut way to get people to bond with us. If we both complain about someone else, then now we're friends. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But of course, if you resort to this all the time, you're always creating enemies all the time. And you are villainizing other people that are presumably people you love.
He's just trying to drive us there safely, and we made a decision. The two of us up there saying, no, it's not going to work.
You guys, yes, I got it. I just feel like the communication on this trip has been a disaster.
So I got you out of DC. What do you want right now?
I'm saying I appreciate that, but
my mistake.
It's just like I can't.
Okay. I want to point out a nice thing that Jen just said was Andrei says, yeah, it's hard driving. And Jen says, I appreciate that. So whenever we see something healthy, I want to point it out. She did that. And let's continue watching. But the other thing she said was the communication has been a disaster. We aren't privy to all the various communication. I don't know what more communication you would need. I suspect that Jen is just looking for something to complain about at this point because, I think this might be the first time I've thought this, but when I think about all the other interactions, this family, the Chuck, Jen, Becca family, and Andrei now included, which is interesting to think about, that actually Libby seems semi-flexible, but she chose someone as stubborn as her siblings, which is just something to think about. We often are attracted to things that we're familiar with, and maybe when Libby met Andrei, she's like, subconsciously, she thought, ooh, you have the same problems as my siblings do. I feel love for you. Anyway, this family, the Becca, Jen, Andrei system, and maybe others, have a really hard time, I think, being seen as an underdog. they're very frequent, or Charlie, of course, how do I mean, he's the most, best example of this, of never be an under person, always be over, always be dominant, always be the last one to say your thing, always be the one proving someone else is an idiot, always be on top, always have other people below you. So for Jen, they arrive at the hotel. Jen has been complaining this whole time about wanting to go to bed. So just go to bed. Just go to your hotel room. Everything's fine. You've arrived at your location. It's not a big deal. It was a 45-minute detour. Not a big deal. 45-minute detour, that wasn't Andrei's fault. So she comes outside and says, the communication has been atrocious. Why? Why would you do that? I would imagine because she cannot go to bed unless she is dominant. Now, why would people do that? I could only speculate, but people do that sometimes because they feel inferior on the inside on a constant basis, and the way that they cope with that is to very frequently and annoyingly assert their dominance over other people so that they can distract themselves from their feeling of deep inferiority or worthlessness or something.
Ireland, because I'm worried Elizabeth's siblings are gonna ruin everything. The conclusion of all this is not leaving women to do a man's job. That's what it is.
Seriously.
Like, no.
So they edited that perfectly. Kudos to the editor of 90 Day Fiancé for that one. Yeah, massively sexist thing. It's fine. If you feel upset at Jen or at Libby and you're bothered, you can absolutely have that complaint. But to equate that to a gender thing and to say, especially what he said, is just 100% sexist, and I'm not going to not comment on that. And then, of course, he knocks things over. So, yeah. And then Becca's husband agrees. Yeah, absolutely. Don't let a woman do a man's job because they'll always screw it up. Yeah, it's not cool, not cool. All right, well, if you haven't become a patron of the podcast yet, you can do so now by clicking on the link below or going to patreon.com. When you become a patron of the podcast, that's how we know you like what we're doing. That's the main way in which people express their, appreciation for this channel. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.